Hello, how are you today? I hope you're all being safe and being smart as we continue through our summer. I can't believe it, but next week is the week that we will be opening our last show. Kinky Boots was supposed to open next week. So next week is our last Wayne Wednesday for the time being. I think we'll do more of these a little later on, but in trying to get everything done for the summer, we've put a limit on it just for now. But you are always welcome to email me questions, and I hope you will. Wayne at mtwichita.org or on the Facebook page or my Facebook page. Just send us your questions, and I will always try to answer. Quite a few questions this week, and the topic is kids in shows. So I pulled, a little visual stuff from some of the famous shows for kids, Oliver and Annie and Sound of Music, and Mary Poppins, King and I, Music Man, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. You don't see too many people doing. It's hard to get that flying car going, but there is a great place for kids in shows. And because we are an educational theater as well as a professional entertainment organization, we have been very proud to work with a lot of great kids and teens through the years. I remember my very first summer that I came here as producer, 1988. We had a couple of shows that season that could have kids in them. Cinderella was one of them, and Evita needed a children's choir, but the big one was the Music Man. And we had 38 kids show up for the auditions, and we were able to use all of them somewhere in the season. Nowadays, it's traditional for us to have 250, 300 kids. And when we say kids, now we mean children and teens. For the longest time, it was hard finding places for teens in shows because once a young person who is working with you hits that growth spurt and gets to be the same height as the regular resident ensemble, if they are not as polished a dancer or singer as the resident ensemble, it's hard to put them in a show because for the audience, they all look like the same age and they think, that person's not quite keeping up with the others. But years ago, 2002, 2003, we started our teen choir, and that's a way for us to keep everybody in the mix. Everybody who's been one of our child performers can come into the teen choir and continue to work with us until they go off to college, and then hopefully they get to be in our company and do other things with us in the future. Henry Castro Miller, hi Henry, asked if any of our kids had gone to Broadway. And I'm sure there's more than I know about, but the ones that we know about, Desi Oakley, we did a Flashback Friday about her. And maybe the first week we were doing this. Go look for the Flashback Friday that's number 1 or 2, and it has to do with the Wizard of Oz. Desi was 8 when she was in The Most Happy Fella. She was 11 when she played Brigida in The Sound of Music. And then she was 16 when we started rehearsals for The Wizard of Oz. She played Dorothy. She turned 17 while we were doing that. And now she's been on Broadway in Wicked and Annie, and most recently as Roxy Hart in Chicago. Also, Sheena Ann Morris started with us as a child and then was almost immediately a teen with us. And now she's done, I believe, 10 Broadway shows, most recently Tootsie and Anastasia. And Megan Drew was a wonderful, wonderful child performer who played Mary Lennox in The Secret Garden for us, and she was little Molly in Annie. That's when we first found her, and then she played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz when she was only 11. She was just wonderful, and Tootie in Meet Me in St. Louis, and she ended up going to California and being in the La Jolla Playhouse production of Jane Eyre the musical and winning an award from the Hollywood Reporter. But she's back here now. But she had a wonderful professional career before she went on to other things. So that's all possible. Oh, and Timothy Cowell, while he was with us as a kid, he went from playing Prince Chulalongkorn in Our King and I, and then suddenly he was in Matilda on Broadway. So it does happen. Century 2 is not that far away from Broadway, even for our children. Donnie Frisch asks, how do you keep the kids focused? Well, one thing that happens for us in the summer, we only have 10 rehearsal days for the whole show. So we have to be very organized about what we achieve each day. So we look very carefully about what the kids are going to have to learn to do. And we call them in only for the hours that we are going to work with them. And when we do our auditions, we look for the kids who can pick up material quickly and can learn swiftly and seem not to punish themselves if they make a mistake. And so we use their 3 hours or 4 hours on a Tuesday and again on Thursday in a very focused manner and give them things to work on when they're away from us. So I think lack of focus for kids often happens if they have to sit around and wait for things. And we try to avoid that. You never avoid it altogether. And finally, when it comes down to your technical rehearsals, of course, everybody has to wait around just a bit as lights get changed, as costume changes get worked out. But we've been so fortunate with the young people that we get to work with here. Uh, Wichita has an extraordinary number of opportunities for young people who like to do musical theater. In addition to our shows in the summer, of course, there's music theater for young people. There's Wichita Children's Theater and Dance Center. There are a lot of other programs around the city, and there is some expert training. We have a number of people who seem to have a really good gift for coaching kids and teaching them to perform better and to sing healthier without burning them out. Amy Minas does a great job with all her kids. Emily Sternfeld Dunn, who works with our teen choir, is quite terrific this way. Katie Banks Todd is doing a wonderful job up in El Dorado. And there are other really fine teachers in our area who specialize in younger voices and younger performers. Caroline Boson asks me thoughts about child belters. Caroline Boson, you were a child belter. So, of course, how do you feel about it? I should ask you. We love a good, healthy sound from a kid. When a kid comes in and sings and they just open up and it has a wonderful musical sound, that's great. If we feel that a child is being encouraged to really push it to make bigger sounds and they're going to hurt themselves, that's not such a good thing. I don't know if you would remember a soprano child who was very big a few years ago, Charlotte Church, and she sang like a 30-year-old woman, and it was really impressive coming out of this, I don't know, 11 or 12-year-old child. But she lost her voice completely at a very young age because she was singing outside what her age range and what her vocal range really ought to be. So we like a kid to sound like a kid. We like it if your singing voice and your speaking voice sound very connected so that you don't suddenly talk one way and then start singing from some highly manufactured kind of way. I don't think that's very healthy, and I don't think those voices last as long. Later on, after the voice has changed and you're in your teens and later, then some kind of vocal training that gives you a rounder, more operatic sound, that can be wonderful. But I think as long as you're a kid, I would try not to get that kind of covered older sound, not try to sound like an older singer. Sound like your age should sound. I know that's tricky. What behaviors would lead you not to recast a kid again? Asks Heather Kruger. Well, I mean, focus, of course, is one of them. If a kid is mean to other kids in the dressing room, of course, that's going to be a problem. If a child has trouble taking instruction or seems to resent it, sometimes, not so much in Wichita, but sometimes when I work at other theaters, you'll see a child actor who's really been pushed by their parents. Maybe the parents are counting on this child to bring extra income into the family, and that puts a lot of pressure. And so when that child makes a mistake in rehearsals, they look like a dog that's going to be punished. They're fearful, and they're afraid to sing out, or they're afraid to make a bold choice for fear of being chastised or punished. And we try to make sure none of our directors or choreographers do that. We try to encourage the child and correct them without it ever being personal or a personal failing. We're just trying to get the best show. Everybody benefits from the show being as good as it can be. And kids that don't take correction in a healthy way are a problem. And it's a problem for them more than for us. But what classes would you recommend for youngins to get started at MT, says Casey Meineke, the best photographer you've ever seen. Casey, I don't know enough about the training programs. I know that Kansas Dance Academy has a really good reputation here, and so does Midwest Dance Mechanics, and as I mentioned, MTYP and Wichita Children's Theater and Dance Center. And I think there are some other good programs, but I really don't know. I think it's great if an adult and a kid can look at things together and talk about them and work on scripts and learn songs together. So long as it stays joyful and fun, I think a young person's going to learn, and they'll want to do it again later if it's a fun thing for them in their youth. Fun story about kids in a show you've directed. You know, we've been so lucky. Last summer, we did a beautiful production of The Sound of Music, and all six of our kids were just fantastic, as were the six understudies who played Austrian villagers and were ready to jump in should any of our Von Trapp kids get sick. But uh, none of them got sick, which was great too. Uh, my friend Mark Madama directed a production of Oliver, and it was out in California. And I was talking to Mark each day after he had rehearsals, and they had the opening night. And I talked to him the next day, and I said, "How did it go?" He says, "Well, what's the worst thing that can happen in Oliver?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. The turntable got stuck because the whole show is done at a turntable." He said, "No." Nancy fell off the platform when Bill strangled her. No. He said, "The worst thing is, where is love?" That is, Oliver's voice changed on opening night. The adrenaline just sped everything up. And Oliver had to figure out how to sing all of his songs down an octave on that opening night performance. That Oliver turned out just fine. He's in the original cast of Book of Mormon and has gone on to a really nice career. Christina First says some casts like Matilda and Billy Elliot had 3 or 4 kids playing the main character. You never hear about multiple Annies, and it's true that Sound of Music doesn't usually match up their kids either. It kind of depends on how many performances you're doing. If a show's going to run for a long, long time, and especially if it's a professional theater, they insist that kids get enough sleep and they get enough tutoring every day if it's during the school year. So that cuts into the number of hours they can be at the theater. But for a summer theater like ours that rehearses for 1 week and plays for 1 week, it's very difficult to get the whole show learned in that time, much less teaching it to 2 sets of kids. So we don't do it in the summer. We do always assign understudies within the young ensemble. Yes, Billy Elliot, the dance requirements of that show are such that the British team that put it together originally insisted they have more than one, and they had 4. It's interesting that both Billy Elliot and Matilda are shows that began in Britain originally, and they knew that they needed to have multiple child performers to handle that. So we don't tend to cast. When we did Ragtime, we had 2 little brothers who were Coalhouse Walker Jr. in the last scene, and they both had to come to the theater every night because their parents had to drive them. So we alternated, and they were both wonderful in it. And but that's that. So I guess that's what we're talking about this week. Come up with some last minute questions for us. Anything in the whole spectrum of the musical theater, ask us, and we'll try to get it in next week on our last Wayne Wednesday for the summer. Thanks.